This exchange between Keith Boykin and Congressman Jared Moskowitz gets heated fast, and I think there's a bigger issue here that deserves attention. Moskowitz seems focused on one question. Will this win the general election? But I'm not convinced that's what Democratic voters are asking anymore. They want change. They want Democrats to actually fight, deliver, and give them something to believe in. And that's where I think Moskowitz may be missing the room. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now let's watch the exchange and break it all down.
Of the guard, perhaps, Americans' disappointment in Congress has been on full display in this primary season, and that outrage has been bipartisan. Now, so far, at least 13 incumbent lawmakers have been ousted. 11 of them are in the House, which is the most in a non-redistricting year since 1948. And while Democrats make up the majority of those losses, President Trump isn't faring well either. Voters have rejected at least 10 of the candidates that he's endorsed for Congress or for statewide office. And that's already more than 2018, 2020, and 2024 combined. On the other side of the aisle, Democratic Socialists notched another surprising victory in Florida. State lawmaker Angie Nixon, who joined the Democratic Socialists of America just a few weeks ago, won the Senate primary in that state. She beat the establishment candidate despite being outspent 16-1. Now, Congressman Moskowitz, you won your primary, so
yeah, happy to see my face not on that screen.
You're not on that screen. But I think the races in Florida were both sides of the aisle. We saw some of the Trump candidates lose. We also saw this Angie Nixon moment, and she actually was asked about your comments about her and her affiliation with the DSA tonight on CNN, and here's what she said.
And don't get me wrong, every organization that I am a part of, I don't agree 100% with all the things that they do. I want to be clear. I have been a Democratic Party member my entire adult life, and I don't agree with all the things that the Democratic Party agrees with, particularly those that accept corporate PAC money. Folks are trying to basically fearmonger a little bit, but we really need to be unifying, right?
I mean, she's a state rep. She's a Democrat. The DSA thing is a fairly recent thing. She says she also became a lifetime member of the NAACP, the Working Families Party. Is it an oversimplification that this is about socialists winning?
Well, look, let me first say I know Angie, obviously, because she's currently serving in Tallahassee, and she outworked Vindman. She deserves credit. She's from Florida. Vindman is not. And she just flat out outworked him and built a coalition. By the way, not really a DSA coalition, right? She built a coalition with African Americans. She built a coalition from people from low income. So not like what you see the DSA doing in other states. And so she deserves credit for that. That being said, look, my grandparents, escaped the Holocaust. My grandmother was part of the Kindertransport. America saved my family's life, took us in. Like, this country gave us all we have. I got people in my district that escaped socialism, right? We're part of the boat lift from Cuba. And so when they see the DSA just the other day, right, embrace 100 years of Fidel Castro, as a celebratory thing, and they see, people like Hassan Piker talk about how Soviet Union should have won the Civil War and that he's not patriotic and that he dresses up as Mao, who, killed 50 million people. We deserve 9/11. Look, Democrats have a right to be angry. We lost the election. We lost every swing state, right? We lost the popular vote, and they don't like what happened when Joe Biden, got out of the race and Kamala came in. They blame us for that, and they're right. But people just want normalcy. They look at Donald Trump yesterday or 2 days ago talking about, hey, we're going to stop the exercises with South Korea. We're going to be good. We're going to be good friends with Kim Jong-un.
Or do they want to throw the bums out? I think that's really the question.
Well,
because I just, when you see this kind of anti-establishment moment that we seem to be in, it does seem like what they're not asking for is like, let's go back to the good old past. They're saying, let's do something completely different. I mean, that's what it seems like.
A platform with getting rid of the Senate is different. A platform with no jails is different.
This is not an endorsement, just a description of what seems to be happening.
I think you're overstating what...
I'm just reading their platform.
Well, no, but I mean, there's a lot of things that in people's party platforms people don't agree with. I think you're overstating what the DSA candidates are representing and understating or maybe misrepresenting, even misreading the room about what the party voters are demanding. I'm not a member of Congress, but I'm in touch with Democrats all over the country, and one thing I hear consistently is that they don't feel like you're doing enough. Not you in particular, Congressman, but they don't feel like the party is doing enough. They don't feel like the party is fighting enough against Donald Trump. They don't feel like the party is offering any change.
But is the way to fight against Donald Trump to lose in the general election?
No, this is the same. The Democratic Party is going through the same sort of growing pains that the Republican Party went through 10 years ago with Donald Trump. Because everybody thought, we're going to nominate Donald Trump and we're going to lose because he's such an outlandish candidate. And you know what happened? That there were so many people on the right who were aligned with Donald Trump all along in the Republican Party, who were waiting for somebody to come and speak to them, and Donald Trump gave them their voice. Democrats on the left are feeling the same way,
again, I understand
and that's why they're relating to Zoran Mandani, Mandani in New York City.
Feelings, right?
No, it's not just about feelings.
You use the word feelings.
Not just about feelings. I use the word, but I didn't mean it. I didn't mean for you to dismiss it in the way that I used it. I used it because I'm saying that the people, those feelings are real. People want. They want change.
They do, but that doesn't mean
the same thing.
But you're not going to get change if you lose the election.
Yeah, I know,
right?
but you're making an assumption that they're going to lose.
It's true.
I do not know that.
I do not know. I do not know.
And a lot of people are saying, you know,
because a lot of people,
so many other races. Why not try something different?
Yeah. To Keith's point, Dan, a lot of people thought Zoran Mamdani was bound to lose, and then when you look at where his standing is.
No one thought he was going to lose.
Well, no. I'm saying as a candidate.
You mean in the primary?
They thought that Mamdani's politics would not work in the city because it was.
We don't know if they're working in the city or not.
Listen, I'm just saying he was the underdog candidate. He came out of nowhere.
Right.
He had what was considered to be extreme policies.
But that's the point.
Now his approval rating is at 69% in New York City.
But you can.
That is that's a ridiculous number.
But hold on. That's fine. The DSA. Hold on. The DSA targeted me in a red seat. I took a bullet for the Democrats, moved seats to run in a Republican seat. In R3, Trump won it by 9. And the DSA spent $1 million, put their whole apparatus to take me out. What was that about? Is that about winning the general? Is that about making Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House?
The DSA is not focused on winning the general election.
That's right. They're not focused on winning.
But I'm not arguing with you about
totally
the point.
agree the DSA is not focused on winning.
No, that's not what I was saying. The DSA is not focused on winning elections for the Democratic Party. I'll give you that.
Good.
What they are focused on is changing the party and moving an agenda within the party. And sometimes that means taking out people.
And specifically with Jared, what's the agenda?
And sometimes that means taking out people who they disagree with.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Let me ask you a question.
Specifically with Jared, specifically with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who they did the same thing to. What is the agenda that they want to move?
That's two different
Just
issues.
admit it. Just admit what it is.
Well, with Jared, the issue, I think, is Israel. And with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the issue is that she's representing a black district, a historically black district, and there were 4 black candidates.
So let me get this right. Hold on. Let me get this right.
No, there were 4 black. She won the election.
Hold on. So
but there were 4
let me
black
get this right. I prosecuted the case against Kristi Noem for her to be removed. I prosecuted the case against Pam Bondi to be removed. Okay.
I get that.
Hold on. And yet, my district will be one of those districts that decide whether Hakeem Jeffries, the first black speaker in American history, gets to be speaker. But because of Israel, they're willing to give up winning the House.
Well, first of all, you're talking about a segment within the party. I don't represent the DSA.
I know you don't.
I'm just telling you.
You seem to be their representative.
No, but I feel like somebody should be, because I think that the fact that they keep winning elections across the country should tell us something.
Win in my district.
That they're winning, and so listen, we should start paying attention and stop
I
just
want to zoom
dismissing
out for
them.
just a second, because I also think that what we're talking about, where you have these insurgent sort of ancillary groups in a political party, you know, back in the day it was the Tea Party, and you could argue even that Donald Trump himself was the personification of that. That is a thing that happens. They challenge the party, even in ways that might seem self-defeating. And I remember when Donald Trump ran on a literal Muslim ban, okay? And that was viewed as extreme by most people. When Donald Trump was running on all sorts of things that the Republican, even tariffs were not a Republican platform. And now Republicans are all in on those messages. So you can't really tell me that the parties are going to, or the voters inherently reject messages just because they are viewed as extreme. Donald Trump has been president 2 times, and he ran on pretty extreme platforms in both elections.
I disagree. I think he ran on things that were a combination of normal Republican stuff and then co-opting what had been traditional Democratic positions. Tariffs were traditionally Labor Democrats. That's what they wanted. And by the way, a bunch of people who voted for Bill Clinton wound up voting for Donald Trump, and now they're Republicans.
Not Republican positions.
They are. Well, they are.
They are now. That is exactly my point.
And
then let's add to that. You were talking about fleeing oppression. Donald Trump literally a couple of days ago was praising Kim Jong-un. So where's the outrage on that?
Which, by the way, I got to be honest, it's tough to keep a list of the things that I've seen in the last 6 months. That tweet about South Korea and Kim Jong-un, okay, that was the most outrageous thing. And if that had come from the DSA, the outrage would have been overwhelming.
And listen, I'm not trying to suggest that all of that is great. All I'm saying is, what are the American people going to accept? And it seems like they actually have the capacity to accept some things that they don't fully agree with if they're getting other things, especially on the economic front. And that's what Donald Trump learned. That's what he ran on. That's why he succeeded in our politics.
I think some of the people you put on, the incumbents that lost, you have to acknowledge they deserve to lose. Thomas Massie in Kentucky deserved to lose. Corey Mills in Florida deserved to lose. Andy Ogles in Tennessee, I think, was kind of lazy. Sometimes incumbents lose not because of larger forces, but because they suck. And they suck at campaigning and they just are lazy, whatever. Some of these people deserve to lose. Some of them get thrown out by larger forces. I don't think you can generalize it to everybody. But in an environment like this where there is volatility, on that we agree, you cannot afford to take anything for granted. And that's some of these people did.
But I think the most important point is that someone like Nixon is winning because she is campaigning about something, right? Specifically, here's how I'm going to change things, right?
She's putting something on the table.
Right. Vindman is basically campaigning against Donald Trump, right? He's the guy. He's the anti-Trump guy. And I think one thing we are learning, particularly with Democrats, is just saying I'm against Trump isn't enough. And this goes to your point about you got to have something to say. And that's why in some of these cases the far left is winning, because they definitely have something to say. And it's resonating with Democrats. That doesn't mean they're going to win elections when it comes to the general elections, but it sure means they can win primaries.
Well, they have an economic message.
Yes.
Healthcare is too expensive, right? Groceries are too expensive. It is a populist movement.
And I would argue we can't say sitting here today that they're going to lose the general election. We don't really know, because if this is
competitive.
Listen, I'm not an expert in Florida politics, but all I'm saying is that when you're in an environment in which voters are infuriated about one thing, which is the economy, and you have candidates who are speaking about those things, you can't rule it out.
But if Democrats lose Michigan, right? If Democrats lose Michigan, the Senate race, there has to be a reckoning, right? There has to be a looking back.
And trust me, there will certainly, will certainly be
let's not make assumptions about what's going to happen.
I didn't. I said if.
But I just say one thing. I remember I was on CNN. I think on Jake Tapper's show that you were hosting that day, or one of those shows. We were talking about Darlisa Avila Chevalier, the candidate who ran against Adriana Esplea. I had no idea she was going to win. I lived in Harlem, and she won. She pulled that race out, even though it was a primary. It shows to me that you cannot predict what people will do, because we are in a throw the bums out moment, and people are mad as hell.
All right, next for us, Senate candidate Darlene.
And this is where I think Moskowitz is missing the bigger picture. Democratic voters aren't simply asking for another candidate who can beat Trump. They're asking for real change. They're tired of hearing about elections while feeling like the same problems remain unresolved. That's why the DSA movement is gaining attention. You don't have to agree with everything they stand for, but you can't ignore the fact that their message about healthcare, affordability, wages, and economic pressure is resonating with voters. And the same lesson applies to Democrats and Labor in the UK. If you're supposed to represent working people, you have to actually convince those people that you're fighting for them. So yes, winning elections matters. But winning just to continue doing the same thing isn't enough. The real question is, are Democrats listening to what their voters are demanding? Let me know what you think in the comments.